and I'd like to welcome you aboard Adventurer, Class 3001 Starship. Our flight today will take us to marvel at the dramatic Martian landscape. To reach Mars, we will pass via the Earth's moon. For environmental factors, we will wait until we're on the far side of the moon before we make a partial hyperspace jump to Mars. Well, I have a number of command flight checks to complete before we lift off, so I'll say goodbye for now and continue with our countdown procedure.
10, 9,
Roger,
8.
Control.
We have ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Lift off.
We're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue, and then we'll take it higher. Oh, we're gonna rock down to Electric Avenue, and then we'll take it higher. Rock it in the daytime, Electric Avenue. Rock it in the night.
Hello again. I'm now opening the forward heat shields so that you can experience the sights as we finally leave the Earth's atmosphere and accelerate to decimal 10 light speed for our 250,000-mile journey to the moon.
Adventurer, this is Control. You are to proceed on stage 1, flight plan to the moon. Bon voyage.
Control, this is Adventurer. Affirmative, we proceed stage 1 of flight plan.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
So it was not until the Soviet Lunik 3 probe photographed the far side of the moon in 1959, 2 years after Sputnik circled the Earth, that we knew what it looked like. The first unmanned landing was by the American Ranger 6 in February 1964, with Neil Armstrong being the first
This is
man
Starship
to set
Adventurer.
foot on the moon on
We
July
acknowledge your
20th,
affirmative to proceed with stage 2 of our
You can
flight
see the
plan.
remains of the Eagle spacecraft as it passed through the lunar surface. The surface temperatures vary between
Destination
+144
coordinates loaded.
degrees C and
Engage
-190
photon drive for partial hyperspace jump. Full drive.
Emergency.
Laser
This
crew
is a
track
meteor
engaged
warning.
with full power.
Defense shield activated to avoid meteor impact.
Keep firing. Emergency. Close heat shields and bring for impact.
Of course, it's a simulator. The sound effects, the pictures, the pitching and tossing of 20 tons of machinery and joyriders are all controlled by two very small, very ordinary computers. In fact, they're the direct descendants of the computers that put man on the moon, but they're something like 1/10 of the size and 1,000th of the cost of the originals.
If you think back to those days, President Kennedy made a national commitment to go to the moon, which was just well beyond what people had even conceived of at that point. And they were faced with a computer technology which was big machines, heavy machines, which is obviously hard to put into space. So that program and that commitment forced the computer industry to work towards shrinking it down, making it much more lightweight, and of course making it far more reliable. And back in those days, the computers kept breaking down. In fact, I used to work on some of those old computers, and sort of quite interesting because after you got familiar with it, you could sit on a little three-legged stool in the front and watch all the indicator lights and the patterns that they would produce when it was running normally, and you could instantly tell when there was a change in pattern and there was something broken down. And normally when it broke down, what it was one of the valves, so you had to rush around the back, spot which valve it was, and it was still hot, and you had to use one of those sort of Chinese fingers to pull it out, push a new one in, and then rush around again, restart the program. Now, if you have to do that every few minutes, it's obviously not a very reliable system. So,
would it have been unthinkable to put man on the moon using that kind of technology?
well, I think absolutely, because A, it wasn't reliable, B, it was too heavy, and C, it was just far too big, and they're the three things that you've got to have to go to space. So the more you can shrink them, the more you can make them lightweight, and of course the more reliable you can make them, the better you are.
Down 2.5, picking up some dust. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Good. Okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Back on the ground, of course, there were computers in the Mission Control operational room, but it wasn't practical to transmit control instructions to the Apollo craft.
A lot of things have to be done very quickly, and there's still a time lag between information going from a computer on board back to Mission Control and back again. So if you've got them on board, you can do a lot of things quickly. Men can do a lot of things very well, but when you've got to keep track of a multitudinous number of things, so that's number and speed, I think that's where the computers come in.
Man, that's unbelievable.
Controlling today's spaceships is even more critical. The first engine is fired at T-minus 3.8 seconds, then the second and third at exactly 120 millisecond intervals. An impossible accuracy for a human.
Liftoff of the orbiter Challenger and the 6th flight of the space shuttle. The shuttle has cleared the tower.
Challenger's underway with our...
Just getting the 2,000 tons of machinery off the ground would be impossible without the onboard computers.
Main engine throttle is going back to 104%. Challenger is go at throttle up. Challenger, you're go at throttle up. Roger, go at throttle up.
This, then, was the achievement of the space race, to miniaturize 4 floors of erratic switches and valves like these, and end up with this, the small, light, reliable computer they took to the moon. It's absolutely packed with chips, which at the time cost something like $1,000 each. Nowadays you can pick them up for a few pence.
It's obviously a cremation. It's number 846.
So, 20 years later, the cheap computers of the 80s are no longer merely machines for fast calculating. They can also bring order and sense to seemingly endless tasks. Here at Heslerton in North Yorkshire, archaeologists are busy trying to piece together a history of an Anglo-Saxon village which existed on this site about 1,500 years ago. They've been digging here for about 10 years, and in that time they've uncovered something like 250,000 different objects, things like this piece of pottery.
The computer is just a tool like a trowel, and for us it's become absolutely essential because the scale of the operation that we're involved in is very, very large. 20 years ago an excavation might have been a small 10-metre square. This is a 400-metre or 500-metre square, and it generates such a vast amount of information that we can only process it with a computer.
What sort of information have you collected?
Well, over 250,000 objects, tens of thousands of layers of soil, tens of thousands of photographs, and in the last 2 or 3 years, many hours of videotape.
For each object that's dug up, what do you need to record about it?
The most important thing in the first principle is the location, which is recorded in 3 dimensions to 1 centimetre.
26560.
Then what material it's manufactured from, its type and a subtype and a classification if it has one, its condition, whether it's been burnt or broken through some deliberate alteration, its date if we know it. By using the handheld computer in the field, we can be collecting the data as we go, and we only have to enter it once. We can enter it, check it and edit it while the excavation is going on, so our archive is kept as up to date as possible.
Although the small computers are useful in the field, they aren't yet able to compare today's information with all the previous findings. But like most computers, they can feed information into others. So every day the main computer receives details of all the finds to be plotted and categorized. Some of the field workers felt that to be forced to classify their findings at such an early stage was a tyranny, but that was not necessarily the case.
For instance, we've just excavated an object made of bronze, and as it looked in the ground when it first came to light, I thought, oh my goodness, this is a brooch. And I pretty well sorted out in my mind what type of brooch I thought it was, because this fragment looked just like the end of a particular type of brooch. And then, as it was excavated, it became quite clear that it wasn't a brooch at all. It first of all became, oh my goodness, this is a spoon, how very unusual. And it is now a mystery object. We don't know what it is. We possibly won't know what it is till after it's been x-rayed. And that will go down as it's a composite object of bronze and iron that is of type unknown.
It's free.
Now later on in the year, or once it's gone through the conservation process, we might define exactly what it is by looking at parallels elsewhere and so on and so forth, and then we can say, right, this is actually a debris. So we emphasise to all of the people that are using the hardware in the field that, to not know what something is not an unrespectable thing.
The findings are transferred to archive disks. These can store very large quantities of information of all kinds: descriptions, numbers, photographs, video sequences and computer models. Copies are then sent out to all who have an interest in analysing the information for themselves.
The work that we're doing doesn't belong to archaeologists, it belongs to the public at large. We should be working for the benefit of the wider public. And anything that we can do that will make it easier for people to understand our results must be a benefit to archaeology as a whole, and a benefit to, I suppose, our general understanding of the environment.
The archaeological record they're creating here should stand for all time. It's an archive, in fact, and although it might be added to, it should never need to be changed. The information collected in this building changes every day. The London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine is a world authority on the health dangers of living or travelling in tropical regions. The results of their research aren't readily available to, say, business travellers. They tend to be published in textbooks and learned journals.
One of the problems with books is that they are, by the very nature of themselves, printed material, long-lasting, but that also means they're dated. And there is also only one book in a library of a particular type. You've got to know where to go in that library. And then you've got to sort through all the information until you find what you want. At the same time, of course, it may be a year or 2 years out of date. So if, as there was a recent hepatitis A outbreak in Shanghai, for example, this would not be in any books. We started off by taking 84 conditions and diseases that affect travellers. We took all countries of the world and 3 different living conditions for each country. And I actually made the original assessment of the risks as I saw them. Once we'd arranged the original data information, I went off to all the experts within the London school and gave them the information about their own subject and said, do you agree with this or not? Many of them didn't, and they picked it to pieces fairly unmercifully. But at the end of the day, we got a very accurate picture of what is happening around the world.
All this was put onto a computer attached to a phone line, so that other computers anywhere in the world could contact it.
And in Swaziland, are you going to be visiting any projects, or are you staying in cities?
Yes, we shall be in the low veld, which is rather
right.
hot, sticky at some times of the year.
Okay, fine, and you're going there at the end of next month. So that's Nairobi and Swaziland. I'll just put the information into the database. Right. Well, what we're going to need to do is assess your vaccination status.
Mm-hmm.
We also are going to find out what malaria prophylaxis you should take. And once we've established that, then we can go ahead and give you your vaccinations.
Fine.
Okay. Right. We've made connection.
Well, it's as up-to-date as it can possibly be. We change information every day, depending upon the news that we receive. We've obviously got to be careful that it's assessed and is a true risk. We don't want to alarm people about things that are scares. We want to assess those and make sure they're right. But when we're convinced they are right, then they go into the database. And immediately people know about them.
Well, most things seem to be in order. You do require a hepatitis B vaccine, that's the last one in your course, and also a gamma globulin. Now, about the malaria tablets, the prophylaxis will be 2 Paludrin every day and 2 Nivaquin once a week, and I think you're familiar with that. Actually, in Nairobi, if you don't intend visiting any of the other areas outside the city, you don't require
Don't need it.
malaria
Have to
prophylaxis.
leave that then. Good.
And again, the information about the treatment is on the printout. So I recommend that you read this part of it. Cut out the necessary details and keep them in your first aid kit with your tablets. Okay.
Right, thank you.
The information is specific to the journey that the person wishes to make. This means that information is much more pertinent and people believe that it is really applying to them. If you give them a book which is impersonal, it's very difficult to persuade people then to really take the information as a personal thing.
Right, that's all over, Mr. John. Okay.
Thank you.
The office is one of the more visible beneficiaries of the information explosion. Inexpensive computers manipulate numbers, words and pictures, contact other computers, and tailor their information for the individual to use.
The expectation of presentation, the expectation of immediate transfer of information is very different now than it was even 5 years ago. I mean, an item like a fax is taken as an everyday piece of equipment. You expect, if you want to get a letter to a customer today, that you can just send it by fax. And it's probably only 3 years ago that you certainly wouldn't have expected to do that. Most people think that technology puts people out of work, but perhaps if you look around the modern office you find more and more people working in it with machines, and it's a skill transfer. It's not so much a thing where machines do all the work and people sit back at home enjoying themselves. Our specialism was to make things easy to use for people who didn't want to know anything about computers but had to use them. and we found that we really needed to be able to use pictures more widely. And so we started experimenting with image processing, which is in effect using pictures directly scanned in and being able to change things and play around with those pictures to make them interesting to look at.
Julia's company recognises the importance of making computers more attractive to use. But for Julia herself, the computer is a lifeline.
I was educated at special school. I've never had very much sight at all. And then I went on to, in fact, Hatfield Polytechnic, where I did an ordinary computer science degree with everybody else. I was amazed that 55 people were the same number in my year as they were in the whole of my school. And I gradually, through my computer science degree, gathered technology around me as it became available. So in the early 1970s, you find technology for the handicapped beginning to be a fairly large field. And in my final year, after I'd worked for IBM research laboratories, I was given a reading machine which made an enormous difference, because the first time in my life I could actually read print. And I got one now which is slightly newer, but it's exactly the same thing, and it enables you to read print with your fingers, and you just scan across the page and the letters appear in a tactile form, not in braille, on your other hand. Now I tend to need to produce things in ordinary print because of course all the people who work with and for me can see. I have a speech board in my computer, so I have quite a lot of things, and in fact I don't think I'd be running this type of company without technology.
We're analysing systems from a very long time ago on the basis of their rubbish. And so we had to analyse the way that we work and the sort of questions we were asking. We spent about a year and a half trying to work out what we wanted to do with computers before we even touched a keyboard.
At the end of the day, we are trying to produce an answer for the traveller. So it's rather the equivalent of a consultant opinion for everybody.
There was a time when equipment had to be specially designed, and a lot of people then couldn't buy it because it was very expensive. Now one can use the basic standard micro in an enormous number of ways.
In the computer technology world, pushing the technology, as soon as you push that technology, people find applications, so it's one thing feeding the other. But definitely space has been the big push.